Hi, good day, good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on where you are. Welcome to this session on sustainable land and agriculture. I hope you're well and getting through the challenges of the pandemic. There's one advantage of the pandemic. We get to meet without having a big environmental footprint, and we're here from different regions in the world. So there's always a positive side to challenges. We have an amazing panel for you today, and before I introduce them to you, I invite you to ask questions via the chat or the questions box. And I will get these questions and ask them when the time is right. And I would like to start by introducing myself. I'm Inke van Sluis. I work for the Roundtable on Sustainable Palm Oil as head of European and African operations. For those who are not familiar with the RSPO, we are a membership-based organization with reaching nearly 5,000 members in over 90 countries. And the mission of our organization is to transform markets to make sustainable palm oil the norm. Natasha Schwarzbach of PepsiCo sends her apologies. She's not feeling well, and I hope she has a quick recovery. I would like to start with asking Kate, can you introduce yourself and the company that you work for?
Sure, thank you, Inke. My name is Kate Schaffner. I work with the Kellogg Company and sit on our global sustainability team. And I focus on our portfolio of sustainable agriculture programs that we develop in partnership with our suppliers and with farmers and other technical partners to help us bring our responsible sourcing goals to life. We've committed to responsibly source our priority ingredients and publicly report on our progress, as well as the lessons that we learn from our partnerships with farmers to produce more sustainably and to regenerate natural resources and communities. So that's why I'm here. It's great to join the group today.
Thank you, Kate. Mari-Carmen, can I move to you?
Yes, thank you very much, Inke. And well, first, thank you very much for the invitation. I'm really happy to be here today. And well, my name is Mari-Carmen Lopez, and well, my position is as a special projects manager in Oleo Palma. And well, Oleo Palma, it's a palm production company in Mexico. And well, my main role around sustainability has been in supporting well, all the progress for the implementation of sustainable practices internally in the company. Well, until accomplishing RSPO certification, and well, beyond this, I am currently coordinating a smallholder certification program also with producers in our supply chain, and well, supporting them to get in this journey of sustainability. So really happy to be here, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mari-Carmen. I had to give the floor to the ladies first because they got up really early. And Brian and Adam are, I think, based in the country where I'm based. Brian, can I give you the floor?
Sure, thanks, Inke. My name is Brian Shaw. I work for a think tank and advisory company in Amsterdam called Metabolic. And there I lead the agri-food team, and we work with the private sector, with cities, national and regional governments, to help them understand their role in the transition of the agri-food system.
Wonderful, thank you. Adam, last but not least, can you introduce yourself, please?
Certainly, Inke. My name's Adam Anders. I'm one of the co-founders and managing partner of Antera Capital, which is a venture capital fund focused on backing entrepreneurs that are going to transform and hopefully improve our food system, making it safer, more secure, more sustainable. And we have offices here in Amsterdam and in Boston, backed by Rabobank, the cooperative farmers bank, and Fidelity, the mutual fund manager out of Boston.
Very good, very good. And in Palm, a very powerful driver of sustainability, I have to say. Can we look at how we increase food production? Because we all know we have one planet and an increasing population. So how do we increase food production while preserving the environment? And I would like to start with you, Brian.
Well, I think the first question is, what food do we want to increase? We we have an increasingly limited option space for the food system. And we know that between our biodiversity, water and land crises, that we need to transform things. And we also know that in terms of either the generation of calorific value per hectare or the impacts per hectare of different food types that we have, that there's a smart way to do this, and that's rather than go for food increase, that's to change the composition of what we eat and what we produce. And I mean, the obvious thing to think of is animal products, which have an order of magnitude higher footprint than other sources of protein, plant-based protein. But of course, these also have a role to play in the food system. And then within that space, if we're talking about what to increase, I would then say that we have to sort of ring fence our mindset and think about the planetary boundaries and think about what is the safe operating space for whichever foods that we're producing in the areas that we're producing them. And that should be guiding us in the decisions that we make. And at the end of the day, we know that we need to have more access to nutrition for more people. And we know that we have a growing population, but we also know that we need to do this in a way which is actually bringing carbon out of the atmosphere, that is producing more biodiversity, restoring and regenerating soils and habitats. And an example of that is if you start to think about the planetary boundaries, and systems thinking really helps you to understand what the option space is between these different types of impacts. And if you have a high impact almonds, for example, that are using a lot of land, you can use water to irrigate them and increase the yield and decreasing the land footprint. And this sort of thinking really helps you to make these decisions.
Very interesting. It makes me think, indeed, it's not just about increasing food production. You're absolutely right. We should also consume less, but also distribute better. Huh? It's not a matter of increasing. Thanks. Adam, any perspectives from your side?
Well, I'm a venture capital fund, so I believe in leveraging technology to achieve a lot of the things that Brian mentioned. So he mentioned a little bit of the role about technology, and rather than repeating what he said, I think there's obviously always an opportunity to transfer best practice. I don't think best practice in farming right now is going to get us there from a sustainability or from a nutritional calorie perspective, affordable nutritional calorie perspective. And I'd like to see us take advantage of the developments that have already occurred in terms of software and digitalization and sensors, but also biotechnology and human health.
Very interesting. Thank you. Kate, can I give you the floor?
Sure. I mean, in addition to what's already been said, I would say the perspective that we aim to take with our sourcing programs is to protect ecosystems that are critical for all of our economies and communities to continue to flourish. They provide assistance services, in some instances, including carbon sequestration, Brian's earlier point, to better manage the natural resources and the economic resources that go into agricultural production. And yes, there is room to better support adoption of practice with farmers that can regenerate soils, that can make better use of water resources, that can improve productivity, and perhaps even diversify the crops that are in crop rotation, which can have co-benefits to not only diversity of potential ingredients in our diets, but also to soil resources that, again, are the bedrock for all of our diets. And in addition, to think about how we can not only regenerate those natural resources and those ecosystems, but also very explicitly support the resilience of farmers of various scales and market access to the impacts of climate change. These impacts are already material to our industry and most acutely to producers. And they are in a position to become less predictable and more severe over the next 10 years. So one of the things that we really work hard to do with our programs is to take a farmer first approach, where we are not only identifying the natural resource concerns and social concerns that we need to respond to in our sourcing regions, but very clearly focusing the work on farmers' needs and what will better set them up for success in the future. I think that piece is critical and worth stating, even if it's so obvious that it almost bears not stating, because if we can't find ways to support farmers and their resilience in the long term, then we're not making the impact that we need to.
Fantastic comment, Kate. And it leads back to, I'm not sure that you attended the first session of today, but somebody there was talking about how farmers actually need to move their plantations up the mountain to get the right climate. So this is a direct impact of climate change, that the regions where production is successful shift, and it basically means that plantation or farms need to be relocated, which is of huge concerns. Talking about farmers, Mari-Carmen, you have the best view and most experience with farmers and yield improvements and increasing palm production. And the reason why palm, and I can say this because I work for the RSPO, the reason why palm is such a crucial commodity to talk about is that it's the most consumed vegetable oil in the world. It's very efficient, 4 to 10 times more efficient than other oils. So that is the benefit, but it's also grown in high biodiverse areas, and it's a crop that has elevated many people, many farmers and workers out of poverty. So how do you develop oil palm plantations and at the same time ensure that the environment is protected?
Yes, thank you, Inke. And yeah, I think following up with a comment from Kate, I totally agree with that. I mean, in our program and in the example that I was saying that we have a program to support the smallholders to achieve good practices, sustainable practices in their production. We have seen this, and you cannot like start building and trying to teach them to preserve the environment, leaving out the economic sustainability for them, right? So I mean, first we started like, yeah, so, you know, you have to apply these good environmental practices because this way you're going to preserve the environment around you. And yeah, I mean, you have to do that. And they were like, very receptive, but, you know, I want to increase my production and I want to be able to live better. So when we got to that, we were like, yeah, I mean, we need to start working with them on the ground to support them to produce more, to live better. And after that, you can talk with them about, you know, improving their environmental and social practices because it's not easy to do that. And if they are living in poverty and if they have not enough resources to live well, it is very difficult to get to the other part. So I think we cannot just think about preserving the environment without thinking of the other two factors of sustainability, which are the economic and the social factors. So I think, yeah, I mean, that's key when you're working with producers and on the ground.
Very good. Thank you so much. So now I would like to shift a little bit and talk about challenges. Like, what are the challenges that you have faced to develop long-term sustainable agriculture? And how can farming remain environmentally and economically sustainable? Adam, can you perhaps talk about the challenges?
From a technology adoption perspective, innovating when you have an annual crop cycle is complicated. Innovating when there's large, powerful corporations is difficult at various pieces of the value chain. And people are very emotional about their food and not always rational. But that said, the size of the prize in terms of both the human need and impact of improving our food system and providing more nutritious and environmentally friendly food is worth it. And young entrepreneurs are excited about it. And also the laziness of the existing incumbent has created a big economic opportunity, along with a little bit of an environmental disaster. So those headwinds are there, but I think entrepreneurs with a bold idea and a big vision and a desire to make a difference are ready to take on that challenge. And we've seen that with the amount of venture capital activity that really only started in the last 5 years in the food and agriculture sector.
Very interesting. Can you highlight an example that was very successful, or one that unfortunately failed because the time was not right?
Something that's very successful. So one of my favourite companies that we work with is providing working capital and transparency to the fresh produce value chain that's importing to the US. And so farmers in emerging markets don't have access to capital. The value chain gets squeezed with longer payment days, and it's an opaque market where there is no clear price for spring onions, tomatoes, certain categories of lettuce, or even lettuce generally. And so by providing working capital, therefore also financing better ag inputs and seeds, and then providing transparency via software and digital solutions down the value chain, you can help everything, decrease waste, improve productivity, improve farmer financial benefits, and actually help the consumer get a fresher, better product at a lower price. And that startup's called Produce Pay, and it's going to finance about 600-700 million of produce in its third or fourth year this year, from primarily Mexico to the US.
Wow. And the project that failed, can you remember when that, I don't know, it was too soon to launch, or?
I've got my fair share of those as well, but I don't want to name a company not from my portfolio and not also from somebody else's. But I think when you take on a challenge that involves a lot of capital and it's backed by venture capital, you hit upon a market correction, and it's very difficult. And I think we saw that with clean tech financing solar panel factories and windmill factories. And we're going to have the same problem in agricultural technology when it's time to build steel and fermentation facilities and perhaps very large new style production facilities for different types of production, be it mass scale insects for insect feed or for protein feed or indoor farming. It takes a lot of capital.
Yeah. I was going to move to Kate, but I'm going to change my mind. Brian, because Brian touched on some of these items yesterday, so perhaps you want to go first, Brian.
Yeah, I mean, I completely agree that I guess lock-in is one of the biggest challenges across the food system. So due to the way that it's composed, it's like an hourglass now, a large number of consumers and then a pinch and then a large number of producers, and there's an asymmetry of power within that. And a lot of different organizations are locked in. Innovation is difficult. We work with regen ag and farmers and trying to go from piloting to scaling regen ag. And indeed, as Alex said, the access to finance, risk sharing, building trust, these things are very, very challenging. Farmers are people, they have livelihoods, and that needs to be sustained and guaranteed, and they're therefore risk adverse. And it's really about bringing the right people to the table, both vertically, but then also broadly within the landscape that you're working with to find the right solutions for all the actors at the same time. And indeed, transparency, finance, collaboration, trust, all these things play a role in that. I think Maria Carmen can probably speak a lot about this as well. In the PALM space, it's a very active conversation.
Do you want to respond, Maria Carmen, or do you want to talk about other challenges apart from transparency?
No, I think I totally agree with Brian. So yeah, I mean I think the biggest challenge is to get to all the producers around the world, right? So, well, I'm in Mexico, so I can talk from Mexico. So we have more than 7,000 smallholders across all the southeast of Mexico. So how to get to all of them with these good information and, try to teach them how to apply good agricultural practices so they can improve their livelihood, so they can live better, and of course, apply sustainability, right? So yeah, I think this is kind of the biggest challenge. And of course, it is linked to, if you want to increase their livelihoods, you need to support them to increase their productivity, which is also a very important challenge. Because productivity levels, at least here in Mexico, there is very low productivity in comparison with other areas. Of course, you can see the positive side, which is, okay, you have a potential to increase. You can produce more with the land that you already have planted with palm. So, I mean, there is like a positive side, but of course it's a challenge to get to that positive. But yeah, I think I totally agree with Brian, and thank you for sharing that.
So it's your biggest challenge to ensure that the farmers are well informed, or is the biggest challenge to ensure that they have like access to finance, or both? Maybe, I don't know.
Yeah, I think both. I mean, to get to all of them, you also need resources. Those are kind of linked. So right now, for example, we have a group of technical people that goes to the ground and works with them. But to get to all of them, you need more people. So to get more people, you need more finance. So it's kind of all linked. But I think there is a potential solution, right? There are a lot of actors that depend in the supply chain from that production. So if we work collaboratively and get to there, I think we can do that. It's just we need to collaborate and work together.
And being on the ground is especially difficult now with the COVID. I'm not entirely sure how it is in Mexico, but I assume it's as bad as other regions. So reaching farmers is much harder. And I hope this period also gives us the opportunity to engage with farmers in a different way. I'm sure that they're not all connected digitally, but we also have to somehow find a way to scale up how we reach them. We can't visit all the farmers in all the commodities. So perhaps we find smarter ways to scale up our reach. Kate, I'm really interested in hearing from you what the Kellogg company does face as challenges, or has faced in the past in terms of challenges.
Some worthy challenges. I think a lot of what's already been shared certainly is applied to our experience. These are not just supply chain challenges and impacts that we're trying to drive, they're systems challenges. And to move a system, every actor in that system has a role to play, and that creates complexity. And it requires time and trust and investment and coordination. And that alone can create some opportunities for challenge. Challenges that we need to meet and need to work through, but challenges nonetheless. I think I would also, perhaps building a little bit more on that, the challenge of building a business case for farmers to change practice. Even with practices that not only demonstrate a potential economic benefit or environmental benefit and community benefit, there may not be a return on investment for those practices for a number of years. For example, if a farmer in the US or North America generally were to change their tillage system so that you are not disturbing the soil as much, which has myriad benefits from a productivity and environmental perspective, or if you were to integrate cover crops into your crop rotation, the literature shows and farmers' experiences show that over the long term, this can have a benefit to a farmer's livelihood, but it takes a few years for that benefit to show up. And to Adam's earlier point, farmers are obligated to make decisions on an annual crop basis, and they don't always have the flexibility to take on that additional risk or take on that additional cost for that first 3 to 5 years while they wait for that benefit to kick in. And that's part of why collaborating with other system actors to bring in additional resources, whether it's technical assistance to help avoid the pitfalls of first attempting a new practice, because when any of us attempt a new practice the first time, it doesn't always work. And that has immediate economic implications for the farmers that are doing that. Or to bring in some sort of financial support or incentive to take that risk on, whether it's cost share for adopting that new practice, covering the cost of new equipment, covering the cost of training, and maybe even a blended finance approach or pay for performance approach. All of those solutions need to be at play in order to bridge that gap and make sure that producers that want to take these new practices on, but haven't been able to before because of that first few years of potential loss, are in a position to do that. I think that's really important and something that we've certainly learned from our experiences with programs to date, and continue to seek opportunities to learn how to do better, because we're not the only actors in this space. And even if we were able to, by magic, perfect this within our own supply chains, we're in commodity systems, and we need to be mindful and responsive to how other actors are doing this as well, and join up where we can do better together.
Yeah, very good points. So there's a question from the audience, and I want to remind them to keep them coming. This is a good one. Small farmers account for 70% of the global food production. So that's more than I imagined. It's huge, huh? Depends on the definition, I guess. Most of them are poor. How are they able to get access to smart agri-tech to improve their production processes? So I'm going to invite the panel. Who would like to take a shot at this one?
Happy to throw some thoughts in. Initially, so first of all, what's working in the favour of smallholder farmers is that the cost of these solutions is plummeting, as is the cost of software and hardware around the world. But also there's less ingrained bias for both old systems in terms of how things are traded and transported, and an antiquated value chain with lots of middlemen, but also practices where we become a little bit too used to how we've always done things as opposed to thinking differently. So the same way that there was a step change, skipping landlines and going straight to mobile, I ideally hope that smallholder farmers can make that transition from an agricultural technology perspective. Finance is a problem when we're talking about sometimes subsistence farming and then very small budgets. That technology piece is getting cheaper at a rate where it's affordable soon, but not in every country right now. And that's where I hope there can be a combination of pull from companies like Kellogg Company and ultimately consumers hopefully value more nutritious food farmed in a way that's sustainable and supportive of other humans. And actually there's a real market for that. And if anything, I think the pandemic experience has brought us all a bit closer together on that topic.
Absolutely, absolutely. And we live in a country where consumers do have the budgets to spend on sustainable food, and unfortunately the consumers still choose differently. I agree. There's more awareness and we have more conscious consumers than we had a few years ago, but it's still very disappointing to be in a part of the world where the economics are in place, but the willingness to pay for sustainable produced food is absolutely too limited at this point. Does any of the other panelists want to respond to this specific question on small farmers?
I mean, I can, Kate already sort of discussed the role of companies within the value chain in supporting smallholders. And I think what you see plenty of examples of using phone technology for the first mile to collect data, to understand and communicate weather and climate data, to map out farms, to collect all sorts of data, which can have all sorts of wins for smallholders in increasing yields, but then also for other stakeholders in understanding the ecosystem dynamics and the inputs and all these sorts of things. So, I mean, it's also about, like, when we talk about agri-tech, we don't have to talk about drones and stuff. It can also just be about smartphones and how we use them, right? And I think there's loads going on in that space, and it's quite positive already.
Very good, interesting. Okay, let's move to the next question. What are the latest and future trends? We've touched on technologies already, but what kind of technologies are there to provide solutions for sustainable land and agriculture? So, Adam, can I start with you?
Yes, certainly. I mean, I think across the value chain, there's a transformation that's begun from both a digital and a biotech perspective, from ag inputs, where we see different methods for actually discovering solutions, but also biological and microbial solutions getting heavily funded. We also see computational biology potentially allowing a step change from a digital perspective on how we look at those processes for discovery and development. And a 50 billion a year human health venture capital environment that can often be leveraged into plant and animal science. On the farm, a few digital tools are only going to help make decisions, considering the average farmer in a developed environment only achieves 70% of crop potential given soil and genetics choice. And we can always improve the soil and the genetics as well. So it's not all weather that we need to wait for on the farm, even though they are. Weather is the driver of success for the average farmer. And I grew up on a farm, so I lived that. Through the supply chain, there's waste and there's inefficiency, and we've learned through COVID that we've got to be more nimble. And I strongly believe that, we already know that that's become a more digital experience by the forced nature of actually being stuck at home, and also people not being able to access their traditional sources of supply and having to be more nimble. And I think that's going to be a good thing in terms of sustainability and service ultimately, and shake us out of some of our bad practices and allow new companies to win. And then finally, at the consumer level, we can use digital tools to learn more about nutrition, diet, and also the fun of cooking. Communities for baking, communities for recipes, sharing of recipes. Cooking I think is fun for everyone. My favourite bit is barbecuing, and going beyond meat is important there. Not referring to specifically the lead brand in alternative proteins. And then you move to biotech at that level, and I think alternative proteins are absolutely important. We also need to do a lot to improve the meat value chain. It's not disappearing. There's room for protective foods and medicinal foods. And I'm looking forward to what entrepreneurs come up with there.
Very good, interesting times in that sense. Kate, can you talk about what Kellogg Company does in terms of technology and looking at future trends?
Sure. And some of the technologies that I would point to are already available. The next phase of that, of course, is how those technologies are brought to scale across the industry rather than serving kind of niche market needs. Yeah. Excuse me. First on my list would be remote sensing around the status of ecosystems we are all working to protect, and even to detect changes in practice with farmers that are adopting new practices that can deliver ecosystem services and community benefits that we all want to support. I think that this serves so many system needs, not only to have a shared source of truth for where we stand with protecting these natural resources, but specifically to improve the granularity of those results so that we're more able to see how farmers are changing practice over time and reduce verification costs for that. So that we can not only be accountable for the positive change that we're all trying to drive, and for Kellogg, that would be within our supply chains and sourcing regions, of course, but to be mindful of solutions that could help reduce that cost for smaller producers specifically. Without a solution like that, verifying adoption of practice requires having a third-party verifier, having an on-farm audit potentially, and perhaps most challengingly, having farmers gather quite a bit of data about their production and house that in a consistent manner, report that to many different potential users. And that is incredibly important from a transparency perspective, but particularly for smaller producers, it's a burden to execute that they can't always meet. So technologies like responsible sourcing and how they are, remote sensing and how they are continuing to evolve, I think would help ease some of that burden a bit and make this work a bit more accessible and equitable for producers who are not already larger in scale and commercial. I would also say, to Adam's earlier point, innovation in ag inputs, particularly recognizing that pest pressures are going to continue to evolve and would on their own and would require humans to continue to evolve our response to them, but are likely to become harder to predict and less similar to the kinds of pest pressure patterns that we've seen in the past because of climate change. I think that innovation space is really promising, and I'm curious to see how that continues to evolve in such a way that it keeps pace with expectations from markets around more regenerative practices and practices that help to maintain biodiversity. That's really interesting for us, and always curious to see how that continues to evolve in a way that is responsive to farmers' needs in turn.
Very interesting perspectives. Mari Carmen, can we give you the time to respond?
Yeah, so I think, well, very good ideas from the panel here. But I want to build on the idea of collaboration and this term of shared responsibility, which is kind of a latest trend right now. Yeah, like we cannot do this alone, and it's not a matter of only the producers, only the companies in the producing regions. It's also a matter of all the supply chain. I mean, it's really interesting and very good to know what Kellogg is doing and what other companies are doing to also support these on the ground. So I think we need to keep building on that and work in collaboration with the partners on the ground and work together to address all these challenges. And of course, keep on thinking on technology and to help producers on the ground that need that to produce more, to live better. So I think that for now, that it's something like a trend, trying to look for sustainably sourced products. I think that's really good, and we need to keep on building on that.
Perhaps a bit as a sidetrack, but I'm really interested to hear your views. How is the EC proposal, the proposal of the European Commission received by Latin American growers, where the EC is going to look at reducing the footprint of consumers by having regulation in place for imports? Do you follow that discussion, and what would be your response? Because that sort of fits into your argument that yes, there is a shared responsibility, and the EC is proposing regulation for imports, but also saying that they need measures in place and they are willing to invest to support producing countries. So in a way, sometimes it's perceived as negative in the producing countries, but when you study the intentions of the European Commission, it's also about supporting the producing countries and see where we can carry the responsibility together. Have you followed the discussions in the European Commission?
Yeah, I mean, well, but at least in Mexico, just to say a little bit of this, is that Mexico imports almost more than 75% of the oil that is consumed here, and the other one is produced in here. So I mean, if I talk only for Mexico, it's like the potential to increase their production, it's already in the internal market. But of course, I mean, when you see other Latin America regions where they obviously need the exports to keep on the market. Yeah, I think it's important to have all the correct information, right? So you have to see the practices that are applied on the ground, and that is not produced in a way that is bad, right? So you need to understand that to have the correct information and just to be informed. I think consumers need to see how things are done in the field, and this is really important.
Yeah. Okay. Thanks, Luke. Brian. Before you address the question on technology, I had a question in the chat from the audience, and it relates to the previous discussion. What can be done in the home to alleviate sustainability pressure on land or agriculture?
What can be done? I missed one word there. What can be done?
In the home.
In the home?
Yeah, I'm not sure whether that was to your point. I think it's to your point, Adam, actually. I'm not sure that.
Yeah. I mean, there's loads that, first of all, it's not just the consumer who has the role to play in driving demand for more sustainable products. It's a pity PepsiCo aren't here, because, they're one of the strongest marketing and food and beverage companies in the world, and they have organizations like that, and also Kellogg's for that matter, have such power to create demand for more sustainable products, which consumers can then respond to. But I mean, look, we're talking about tech and food waste and what we're eating and all these sorts of things. And I think it's quite clear that we're not going to meet our global sustainability objectives with any one of these things alone, right? I think there's a great paper that came out in 2018 modeling a lot of different scenarios around food waste, tech, and diets. So what the consumer can do is change the way that they eat, have a flexitarian diet, talk about it, be political about this. It's good to have a flexitarian diet. Do your barbecue, Alex, just once a week. It's still okay.
On charcoal, I wonder. What do you use for burning that can be environmentally friendly?
Hard gas, probably in the Netherlands.
Yeah.
No, but it's really important. The consumer has an incredibly important role to play, and we won't make this transition if the consumer doesn't play their role in this. We cannot continue to consume the levels of meat and dairy that we do, and that's increasing right now. It's still increasing all over the world. So that's a major thing that we need to address. And then we can also talk about plastics and recycling and all these sorts of things. But I think do what we need to do as individuals, communicate that with our friends and families, vote in the right parties who are going to set the framework for the private sector to respond, that will put the framework in place to support smallholders, to deal with telecoupling from Europe to Mexico, for example, so that we all collectively in a systemic way have a chance of turning this thing around. That would be
it's interesting. Yeah? We as consumers, as conscious consumers, have to talk more to our families, and if we do that successfully, the awareness automatically increases to a large scale. Okay, let's shift gears a little bit. I want to talk about nature preservation and protecting ecosystems in combination with sustainable agriculture. Marie-Carmen, do you want to talk about nature conservation and oil palms? How do these two go together?
Yeah, of course. I think, I mean, they go very, very together. And of course, to address that, first you have to understand the context, and you have to go to the field and see what is there, right? So there are already some palm plantations in there and other crops, but there is still I mean, areas of forest and areas to preserve. So in order to do that and to protect the ecosystems, you have to go and first make a full diagnostic of where you are producing, right? And to understand what are the good practices that you can do there to preserve these ecosystems, and not only the environmental part, but also communities and the people that is living there. Again, you cannot just see one side of the story, the environmental part. You have to take also the social aspect. So I think it's really important to understand and to address that in a way, in a collaborative way with the communities. Don't do it alone. It's really, really important. Create synergies and try to and teach all the people on the ground what they can do to preserve this. So I think it's that. I mean, first go make a diagnostic, understand the context, and after that, build the strategy. And yeah, that would be my opinion.
Yeah, and we all have to realize how difficult it is to preserve nature. It's costly, time-consuming, and it's land that you can use for agriculture. But it is required and it's necessary. But I think we need to, again, have more supporting systems for nature conservation. And I think it's so easy to say that you develop policies and want to implement policies on fighting deforestation. But what is the alternative? And we have to better support the nature conservation. Kate, do you have projects, perhaps very practical projects on the ground? How do you conserve certain areas and work with the farmers to ensure that certain areas are not deforested? You're on mute.
You're on mute.
Yep.
The motto of 2020. My apologies.
No worries.
So yes, I'm happy to share some of our experiences with projects to protect natural systems. I'll first echo Mary Carmen's comment that so much has to be done first before you can begin work with partners and with farmers. And it's easy if you are not doing that work on a daily basis to underestimate that level of investment and time and coordination. So I really appreciate her calling that out and recognizing it for the value that it provides. For a few examples, the first that comes to mind, of course, for me is the certified ingredient volumes that we purchase. We're members of RSPO, and that's a really important part of how we ensure that our sourcing does not contribute to the loss of natural systems. Beyond that, of course, we have a number of partnerships with our ingredient suppliers and with farmers that have explicit goals around protecting natural ecosystems. One that comes to mind is our work with our vanilla supplier, Simrise, in Madagascar with smallholder vanilla producers. It's a 3-year partnership. We're in the very last bit of our 2nd year of that work. And the work has included training smallholder producers in climate smart agriculture practices, as well as alternatives to slash and burn practices, which is important, I'm sure, as this group knows, not just with respect to reducing the risk of deforestation and all of the climate and biodiversity and water impacts that can imply, but also because Madagascar is a biodiversity hotspot, being able to integrate better management practices that reduce habitat loss can hopefully preserve that biodiversity and do so in a way that still enables producers to stay productive. I think that's one really great example, and we're very lucky in our partnership with Simrise and others on that work. Another one, maybe closer to home for me, would be in our work with wheat growers in Michigan in the Saginaw Bay region. Saginaw Bay is a critical freshwater resource, not only for drinking water for local communities, but as well as for a number of local species, particularly for birds. So finding ways to reduce the impacts of agricultural production in the region, because it is a really important farming community, while also promoting practices that support farmers' productivity. Again, a kind of win-win approach is critical. We've worked with our supplier and with the Nature Conservancy to equip farmers with soil health practices that reduce the loss of sediment, soil erosion, from their fields into this critical freshwater resource, and have been able to avoid thousands of tons of erosion into the Saginaw Bay over the course of several years. And that's been a really wonderful result to see, and important for us to consider not only the land-based ecosystems that we have a responsibility to help to protect and support our partners in protecting, but as well the freshwater systems that are critical from a biodiversity perspective, from a community perspective, and an economic perspective.
Very interesting. Adam, does Antera Capital have projects where you support the conservation of nature or specific ecosystems?
So we don't invest in operating assets. We invest in technologies that can be adopted on a farm. And from a positive impact perspective, I don't think there's anything we invest in that doesn't improve our food and agriculture system. Although, there's always going to be the edge where some people want to go pure organic or pure regenerative. And so, I think with this group on the call, if I'm allowed to ask a question, Inka, I'm curious whether, particularly Brian, you have a focus on regenerative farming. I'm a supporter of regenerative farming, but can we feed the world within our lifetime with regenerative farming, do you think?
Good question. I'm glad you asked it, because it feeds into the answer I was going to give to the other question. I think when we talk about regenerative agriculture, essentially what we're talking about is, okay, there's no set definition of it, first of all, right? But we're talking about building soil health. That's like the minimum. And then you talk about like self-sufficient systems. This is like the other end of the spectrum. And I think when we talk about regen ag, short answer to your question, by the way, is I think they looked at this for organic farming and they said no, it's not possible. But I think organic farming and regen ag are two different things. So it remains to be seen is the short answer. But I think at the end of the day, when we talk about regen ag, when we talk about nature conservation, when we talk about stacking wins, and really great to hear from Kate about sort of contextual targets and contextual activities. So what are we trying to protect? What issues are we trying to deal with, and making decisions around that? I think a lot of the work that we do, much more than regen ag, is helping organizations to understand what they should be doing in what places. And this also feeds into available technology, having a truth, as Kate said, right? So like these data sets, Earth observation, which can really help us to understand what should be done where. And there you can say, if I'm a global organization, a multinational, I have a footprint in 120 different countries, it's not going to be necessarily appropriate to scale regen ag in all of these. But it's going to be helpful to understand where doing regen ag can really help us to get the best bang for our buck in terms of carbon drawdown, to help with nutrient leakage, to protect soils and these sorts of things. But it's also really important to know where you should potentially intensify, where you can de-land, where you should be conserving and investing in restoring ecosystems and these sorts of things. And there's some amazing studies now saying at a good granular scale, you know, if we want to meet our climate commitments, we need to conserve 50% or 30%. They're of course disagreeing, but they tell us or suggest where these can be, and this can really help us then to work with local stakeholders, to work with our value chain partners, to understand what the option space is for these places. One of the answers to that, for sure, regen ag. Anyway, why everybody's making commitments to regen ag is the potential for decarbonization, right? That's more or less what most of it is about. But it's not just about regen ag.
Very good. I think I will take one question from the audience, and then we move to our final thoughts. I'm not sure that you have the answer to it, but I'm going to ask it anyway. What about subsidies provided from national governments in order to boost the agricultural upgrade towards reducing global footprint figures? Is there enough traction from the EU towards agricultural infrastructure? Anyone keen to answer that, or should I pick a different question?
No, look, I mean, all I can say is that it's very, very difficult to make venture or technology investments in heavily regulated markets or markets that require regulatory step in order to have an outcome, because you don't know when it's going to disappear. It's difficult to predict, and it's a precarious business model to rely on. But it's a huge budget, and in the EU, and I just hope they use it responsibly. But I don't encourage entrepreneurs to bet their life on where that cash is going to go.
I can build on that. There was recently the State of Europe's Nature report came out. So this is directly looking at the Natura program of, you know, where do we protect nature and how do we restore it? How do we make it better? And it turns out that despite all the money invested in this, that nature is still declining. So the majority of these Natura protected sites are either declining or not improving. And the primary driver, there's a few others, but the primary driver of this is agriculture, agricultural expansion, agricultural intensification. So, you know, when we talk about the role of subsidies and we look at what's going on with the CAP and the Green Deal, massive missed opportunity from the European Commission and parliamentarians to align on changing some of the damaging aspects of the European food system to shift from degrading ecosystems, looking at the consolidation of farms, how the landscapes are changing in Europe, all these sorts of things. I mean, it's not aligned right now. So I don't know that we're locked in yet to the next cycle, but it doesn't look too good.
Okay. Kate or Marie-Carmen, did you want to say anything about subsidies in your specific regions?
Well, I am not a government relations professional, so I will start with that grain of salt. With that said, I think the the question underscores how important it is for any efforts to protect natural systems and to support farmers to be responsive to enabling conditions. Public policy is incredibly influential in that. And there can be quite a bit of variation from country to country from a regulatory perspective or an incentives perspective, and that's where subsidies would fall. Speaking generally, and maybe not fully satisfying the question, but keeping a more global perspective, I do think that there is a need to, wherever possible, align incentives or regulatory expectations so that the barrier to entry for farmers for more regenerative, more sustainable, more resilient agricultural practice to be lower, because the barrier to entry is always so high, and there are always so many sources of cost and risk. And even with full leadership from the food and agriculture industry, I think there is still a really important role for the public sector to play, and that partnership is critical. My sense is that there is general consensus around the importance of that level of partnership, and quite a bit of room for interpretation and additional work with respect to the consequences of the details of those incentives packages. And perhaps that would apply with respect to subsidies specifically. So that is an area of continued work and necessary work, because none of us could do this alone. And even the best work can be limited in how much it can get to scale without the right enabling conditions in place.
Very, very good.
Yeah,
Thanks.
and I think, sorry, just to build on that, yeah, I think, I mean, subsidies alone are not a bad thing, but I think if they are there, there has to be support for the use of those subsidies. And you cannot just, give the resources and just leave it like that. You have to ensure that those are applied in a good way, and that, I mean, in an example, that those are given directly to producers, to smallholders. You have to also create the mechanisms to have the support that they need to apply the resources in the best way possible. So I think subsidies alone are not a bad thing, but you have to think of the other mechanisms.
Exactly. Very good point. So we only have 2 minutes left. You can say one sentence, give a take-home message, although everybody is probably at home, but take something that people will the audience will remember when they think about this session. Adam, do you have a closing sentence?
Get involved in the technology-driven transformation of food and agriculture. Don't be afraid of putting the words science and food together, and let's build a more resilient system.
Very good. Thank you, Brian.
This is such an exciting space, right? We need the food system. We need to keep eating, and we need to transform it. And there's so many opportunities for most stakeholders in the value chain to be a part of that future fit food system. And I would just invite everybody to get stuck in and collaborate and make it happen.
Thank you. Marie-Carmen?
Yes, it will be collaboration is a key to address sustainability in food systems. So again, inviting everyone to do that.
Very good. Thank you. The final thoughts from Kate.
Oh, goodness. I echo the focus on collaboration, that success really, really hinges on commitment to that collaboration. And I think what we've heard from this discussion today is the importance of a silver buckshot approach, so to speak. We really do need to be able to employ a number of solutions and partnerships and strategies to create the food system that we all want for ourselves, for our future, and for our children's futures. And that requires flexibility and collaboration and listening to each other.
Thank you so much. Thank you, dear panel. It was lovely to spend the hour with you. I've learned a lot, and I hope the participants did as well. It was very engaging and very interesting. Indeed, virtual applause to you, and thanks a lot for the organizers for having us.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.